Philip Stoughton. Welcome to the inaugural episode of That Inspection Show. I'm joined by three guests and three friends that I've known very well in the industry for many years, who I consider to be some of the most knowledgeable experts and most thoughtful people with respect to inspection in the industry. We've got Joel from Koh Young. Joel runs the Americas operation and has been at Koh Young for some considerable time. Zeev is the CEO of Cybord, a relatively new player in the inspection industry, making lots of waves and lots of people talking about what they're doing. We'll get into that a little bit more. And Bill from Creative Electron, who most people know. We're going to keep today nice and concise, so I'm not going to do too much in terms of introductions, but we'll add their bios to the documentation around the video. What I wanted to start with, gentlemen, is just this simple premise and understanding whether you agree with me that fundamentally having really good quality inspection data is the currency of the smart factory. It's the lifeblood. It's what we need to get that smart factory journey underway and to ensure that it's a successful one. So let's start with you, Joel. What's your view on that? I mean, obviously, inspection equipment is your business, so one would expect you to agree, but just kind of tell me where you sit on that.
Sure, yeah, I absolutely agree, Phil. In fact, as we go forward and we continue to evolve this smart factory phenomenon, if you will, we're putting more and more what I'll refer to as sensors in the line. Now, those sensors are our inspection tools or Bill's inspection tools. SPI, AOI pre-reflow, AOI post-reflow, X-ray, et cetera, et cetera. And again, it's the data, it's the results that we're seeing because we're very measurement-based in particular that is guiding us in terms of whether we are on track or not, right? Mm-hmm. And it's really the primary piece of information that's controlling the process and giving us indications, whether that be for manual adjustment or as we're going forward and doing more and more now with automated adjustment and self-healing, the information that provides the basis for doing that. So, the point to be made here is, and I think this is a real differentiating factor that not a lot of people have necessarily talked about up to this point, but I had some conversations at Apex. The data set drives everything, and the robustness of that data set drives everything. We're going to higher and higher optical resolutions, which gives us more and more granular measurement capability. So now the repeatability and the reliability, accuracy of that data has to be maintained as we embark upon those higher resolutions and finer measurements based on the components we're seeing. So, at the end of the day, I think we're going to wind up with varying levels of smart factory, and maybe that's okay. Depending on the user's needs. And depending on the machine sets that they've selected, which are possibly able, or maybe in some cases less able, to provide that most optimum, most robust data set that can provide the smartest smart factory. And I think that's where we're going to be going next, right? So again, connectivity alone isn't smart factory, right? We have to make sure that we're working with the right providers to give us, again, that right data set acquired the right way, that is measurement based, et cetera, et cetera. And now I can apply that big data to artificial intelligence to do other things, which I'm guessing we'll talk a little bit about as we go through the conversation.
As we go through. Yeah, no, absolutely. And you make that very good point that it's, you've got to have that data right, because you're using that data to create insight, and that insight is driving value. Zeev, it's very much like, the old adage of garbage in, garbage out. If you haven't got the data right at the very early stage, you're not going to be able to create insight. And when I look at what you're doing within the way you analyze and verify components, it's a zero trust model. So your data is essential to that process. Do you see data as being kind of the fuel, the lubricant for the smart factory?
I think, first of all, yes, and it's much more wider even than that. First of all, what we're trying to say is that the components today, practically we have only metadata on them, and we want to change that and to have vision data on all the components, and the components which are the heart of the electronic board, we want to check all of them. We are checking 100% of the components. So now, once we are checking each of the components and doing that, we're able also to provide all our partners in this supply chain with a lot of data on the components themselves. So components which are defected, I mean, genuine, but defected, not only the situation is counterfeit. We check counterfeit, of course, but we try to eliminate that. But in some cases, you have more than 50 ppm of defected components on very good, theoretically, materials. And this information should be shared along the process. So all the information that we're actually collecting on the component during the process of before entering the warehouse, on the pick and place machine, later on the AOI machine, all this information is valuable data that is used by the process on the continuous, on the next steps of the process. And that's where I think the AI concept of AI and big data is going to support the whole industry. So it's can be used with people that are, even in the beginning of the design, can use information that we are collecting during the process, because then you can check what you want to put on your AVL, not just according to price and availability, but also on quality. And later on, after design, we're coming into the production itself, and the accuracy of the pads and all that can be checked with the components that we will expect to put there. So suddenly we have a lot of measurements, a lot of data that is available to everyone that is actually supporting the process. The data is not just for us for anti-counterfeit or anti-quality, it's actually available. I think that's the vision. The vision is that now we have a data platform, and the data platform is available to everyone that wants to make this process more automatic and more higher quality and much easier to control. That's, I think, the main point of collecting all the data.
Yeah, yeah. And Bill, it's a huge amount of data everywhere, and not a drop to drink. How do we make sure that the data is the right quality and that we're able to turn that data into insight or into information that gives us value?
Yeah, so it's a good way to start is by understanding there's several words we use sometimes to describe very similar things, right? But they're very different things. So data is that raw piece of content that we extract from our equipment, right? In our case is how much void a specific ball in a BGA has, or if it's a short or an open on another pin. So that's data. And then that data doesn't really have a lot of value unless it's contextualized, right? Unless that data is put into a context. And once that's done, it becomes information. Information is extremely valuable, right? Yeah, so that's one path that data takes in the smart factory. We hope that every single piece of data can become information, right? Information that can tell an OEM if a stencil is damaged, if they have to replace the solder, something else is happening. That's information. It's something that you can act on, actionable data. And then most of the factories, most of the companies we see, unfortunately, are great at transforming data into noise, which is data that's stored in a box and is never looked at again, unless something happens, right? Unless something happens. and it's a recall, RMA, something happens. And then a human being has to go back, sift through all that noise, and try to find a piece of data they can transform into information to debug, to diagnose, and figure out what's happening. The whole process of the smart factory, right, is to, the way we see it, is to provide automated and a constant and a continuous way to transform data into information. Even if the information is, everything's going well within the control parameters, good job, keep on doing what you're doing, right? And as soon as things are deviating, now you can act before the train completely falls off the track and off the bridge, right? Now, your point is very good. The quality of the data, right? If you're not collecting good data, it's your ability to diagnose and figure out what's going on is going to be compromised. So that initial collection of content has to be done correctly. The good thing on the other side is the more data you have, you can actually pay a small penalty on the quality of the data because you have so much of it that statistically you might end up back into control. So we see the future, going back to Joel's point about smart and not so smart factories. We're going to have noisy factories or factories that collect a lot of data and they're really proud of it. And all this data shows up in black boxes that stay in a corner and never really get used. And then really smart factories, right? The companies that are able to consistently transform data into information they can use for dashboards, and they can use to process improvement, and they can use to make their products better.
Yeah.
So that's the way we see the future unrolling here.
Yeah, and it's a very big, broad data picture, isn't it? When you look at the data, it's coming from lots of sources, and it is, you talk about factories being noisy. Sometimes somebody referred to it as like a spring break party. There's a whole bunch of people making a noise, and you got to figure out who you've got to listen to, because all of the machines are talking. Some are just noisy and irritating, and some are giving you very poignant information that you need to respond to. So you've got to sort those. Joel, that kind of brings us on to the ecosystem question. And I find when I look at the history of Koh Young, it's fascinating as you look at where you've moved to the different locations in the line and added more information from the different machines. But they're not silos. They're not individual pieces of data. You've got to be able to use them together. How important is it to have that ecosystem, not just within what you do, but within the broader factory, and actually bring in inspection data from a number of different places to get the right outcome?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, when we get to that, again, smart factory, if we can somehow define, these various levels as we go forward, and I think we will. I think we will have to put some definition to that because of the various levels that'll be attained. But to get to that end game, where you're maximizing the information, as Bill referred to, you've converted that data now into information that you're generating to create an actionable event. Again, whether that be manual or automatic, ideally. So, I've used the term self-healing a lot over the last few years, and I think that's really what we're trying to get to. We're monitoring the process at all the key locations with the various sensors being used. We're able to communicate between machines what we're seeing. We're able to send information back to certain systems to make corrections on the fly when we see anomalies that occur. And then we feed that information into, again, a dashboard or something that a human can take action with to fix completely if it is something that would take that type of effort, rather than the fixing on the fly, which could be kind of considered a Band-Aid, right? Maybe you haven't fixed the process, but you've corrected the process while you're building, which is good, but ultimately that process needs to be corrected. So having that ability to take in information from various sources, feed information to various sources up and down the line, I think is the only way we're going to get to that whole self-healing approach. So Again, it's got to be, again, as we continue to evolve, more and more and more and more inspection points give us greater and greater and greater ability to, as Bill said, keep the train on the track, right?
Yeah,
and correct for foolproofing, so it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, and it's the reliability and the verification of those sources that's important. When we look at that ecosystem, Zeev, it's interesting to again look at the history of what Cybord have done, and then initially you were just taking the images from the underside of the component as the component was placed, which I thought was a really cool system because it's no hardware installation required. It's a software deployment. But I think what's interesting is your OEM customers have now started to ask, hey, can we get that same level of inspection at goods inward? And you start to look at reel-to-reel solutions. And then some are saying, well, how do we build a more holistic picture? And let's start to take the images from the AOI system at the end of the line that give you the top of the component as well. So when you look at what you're doing, are customers asking you to be more involved in the ecosystem and actually, to play nice with other inspection companies and to, kind of make the whole thing work so you can get some information and insight from that data?
Yeah, I mean, what we are doing is actually expanding this ecosystem. In the beginning, we were actually providing systems for the EMS, for the manufacturer, that he will be able to do a better product, do a more functional product, save money on it. Now we are actually giving eyes also to the OEM. Now the OEM looks at the same thing in a different view. He looks at the product as what he's going to get in the end product. So he wants to make sure that everything is nice and neat and no problems in the way, but he also can understand the data and take the information out of the data, which means all the alarms and all the let's say points that you want to check later on back in his design. So suddenly the OEM is able to see what's happening on the line from one hand, take the data, take the information and convert it to actionable decisions on the procurement, on the design, on the AVL, every point that he was before even the manufacturer, and give and as well take the ecosystem to the end of life of this product. Because now we are taking all the data on the line during the manufacturing, but this product is going to be alive, let's say 5, 10, 15 years, depends on the industry. And now the ecosystem is actually changed to be also the guys that are going to maintain this product. And the information is united. So the guy that's going to maintain the product in 5 years will be able to know exactly the day, the time, the second, and the number of the reel, and also all the neighbors that were for that component that has a problem with, or he is suspecting. So the ecosystem now is not the manufacturing time, is the ecosystem starts in design and finish up on the end of life. And now that's, I think, something that the industry will start endorsing because the data is there. The data is there and the actionable points are there. So also what we try now to do, and that's quite a difficult task, is to provide every decision maker in this process with the right dashboard. And that's exactly what Bill says. Taking the noise and take it away and only show the dashboard that is interesting to the guy on the end of the line, or to the guy in the procurement, or the guy that is actually doing the maintenance and receiving the RMA. They want to see different information. They look at the same data, but they want to see different information. And that's the beauty about it.
Yeah. Bill, who runs the ecosystem? How does all that hang together? Is it just, is it almost like a cooperative of members, or is it the responsibility of the MES, or how do you hold this ecosystem together?
It's a very good question, right? That's that's the next race for the management of big data for the EMS companies, and big players are trying to take a big stake on that fight, which is at the end of the day an attempt to answer the question of who owns the data, who owns the information, right, and who's going to benefit from it, right? The data that I collect from Zeev's factory and Joe's factory and Phil's factory, can I use that on Paul's factory to make that factory better, right? Do I, as a supplier of software and big data and AI, do I have the ability to do that, right? I mean, we are at the and I'm glad you're asking those questions, Phil, because those are visionary questions, right? We're at the very early stages of putting together the basement bricks on this very tall building we're coming up with, right? And I don't know who owns that data, right? If it gets big enough, it's going to be Google, Facebook, or Amazon, right? Eventually, they might just take over the market and run it.
Whoever can get their hands on it. That's right.
Exactly. So realistically, at this point, what we have is extremely fragmented supply of solutions, right? Yeah. We have our sandbox. Joe has his sandbox. Zeev has his sandbox. And at some point, as the value of those sandboxes is shown and is demonstrated over time, which I believe we're doing now, all of us, that integration is going to become the path forward. And that integration is tricky, especially for large multi-billion-dollar EMS companies, right? They like to own things and they like to manage things, especially as critical intellectual property that they are developing, right? Because the issues that, if I am an EMS company, right, the issues that I'm solving on a daily basis are not something that I want to make it easier for my competitor to solve tomorrow, right? I want to be able to get a heads up. If I find a bunch of counterfeit components, right, if I don't necessarily want to tell everyone that I did that, I want to know it, but I don't really want my competitors to necessarily know it, right? I want them to have to hire you to find out on their own, right? So it's a challenging question because we talk a lot about sharing information and connectivity and what we see is some level of sharing and connectivity within sealed walls, right?
Yeah.
Something we haven't talked about, Phil, is the liability that goes with all of that. Yeah. Right. So now we're sharing information with each other. And as I alluded to previously, potentially taking action with information that we're providing to each other. How do we know that that's the right action in every case? And how do we know if something goes awry and issues are created, who's responsible? It's kind of like back to the who owns it. We've been approached about basically cloud storage of customer data. And there are people out there that are entertaining such thoughts. There again, I think a huge liability if you are now in control of and been asked to oversee that customer's, again, very potentially proprietary information. So there's a whole nother layer here that
there is, isn't
that
there?
hasn't really been talked about yet. But as Bill said, we're still climbing that ladder.
We're at a very early
stage. For example, if I have Zeev's information, I know exactly what an EMS company is manufacturing, what they're shipping, right? There's a lot of data that we possess as a group that it can't be shared, right? It can't be shared. Yeah.
It's easier than it looks like, because compare it to the medical information. Today, researchers around the world are taking information about thousands of patients all around the world and making a lot of research. They don't know your name. They don't know who is the guy behind this disease or whatever behind those blood tests. That's the same concept. Right. What we do, and of course we barge into that in the very beginning. The image itself, as much as I checked with lawyers and people, legal guys, is owned by the OEM. Okay, in our case, the image of the component once it's placed. Now, we never give you the information about where it is placed and who is placing it. So if it's Flex or JBill or whoever, but the only information that goes up to the common knowledge is about the item itself when it's anonymized. So once you do that, the same thing you do with blood tests, etc., then you will be able to know that this lot number comes from whoever is actually a counterfeit. But I don't need to let you know that it's bought by an agency in Israel or US or whoever bought it and sold it, etc. Now, still, the information that this lot is a counterfeit is very valuable for you, and you don't mind to get it. And also, I don't mind to give it to you because it's not something that's proprietary. Yeah. But from the other hand, you're able to use it. Or if I give you the information, if I scan the 5 million of items coming from whoever company, I don't want to say any name, and I see the quality of this company is higher than the quality of the other company, that's not the proprietary information, because I've seen this information from 10 operation lines, and I've seen 10 million of those items already from 5 factories, and now I can score it. This information is it's okay if it's going out, because I'm not going to tell you from which companies I took it, or it's so big, so it's irrelevant. And this kind of information can be shared. What we cannot share, of course, is any proprietary information on the board itself or on the list that comes to this board and that company. Yeah, there are a lot of measurements that needs to be done now, and we see that also
lots of safeguards, lots of safety rails needed, and
there's a lot of security around that.
Yeah,
the guys that are going to make a lot of money out of that is guys like AWS and Google and Azure, because
all the usual suspects.
Yeah. Well, it's curious, isn't it? Because with ownership comes responsibility, and as Joel said, also liability. So I think that's a complex issue. It feels like we need some joint effort in terms of, I don't know whether it's IPC or SMTA or any of those associations. I don't know whether any of those are doing a good job. I know there are people within those organizations that we'll have on future shows to talk about that, but there definitely needs to be some initiatives on where data is shared, because if we are acting upon data, we need some verification on the quality of that data, some way of measuring that. And we talk about data giving us information, but if we've got two data sources giving us contradictory information, we've got an even tougher insight and decision process. Bill, I just wanted to shift gears a little bit and talk about the sheer size of the data. There's a huge amount of data. It's constantly growing. As you say, some of it is noise. Is AI the only solution? Is that the tool that we need to be able to sort through this data, figure out what's good, figure out how we weight data and contextualize it and make use of it? Is that the only way forward, and where are we on that journey?
Well, it's a way forward, right? I'm not sure it's the only way forward, but it's definitely today, with the computing power we have available to us, it's a very interesting way to go forward, right? And for those out there skeptical about artificial intelligence and machine learning and all those algorithms behind it, this process of the transformation of data to information is not a one-to-one relationship that a simple algorithm can apply, right? There are some complexities and some extra parameters that we have to take into consideration to go from an image to an information that you can use on a dashboard or something else you want to do. Now, you can have a lot of human beings trying to do that. The challenge is that they have to be trained, and not only trained, it's awesome if they have experience. So to have a lot of experienced, trained human beings doing that on a reliable and consistent basis gets expensive. And as you said, as data grows, becomes unattainable, right? So AI is a piece of software we can deploy that can do that in a fairly reliable way, right? And the guys doing self-driving are leading the way as far as big data and reliability, right? Tesla has been collecting a rugged and robust data set, and they're using to deploy their self-driving algorithm with the use of artificial intelligence. And they've been doing that fairly well, considering, if you had a chance to drive a Tesla recently, it does a really good job. Once in a while, it gets weird, but that's why, just like in an EMS company, you're always going to have a human behind the wheel, right? It can't really be, at least for now, fully autonomous, but we're going to get there eventually. I'm a believer.
Yeah, and I think when you look at autonomy, I think it's really interesting, because when you do look at autonomy for the self-driving car, there are different levels, aren't there? There's levels of autonomy that start with driver assist, and it feels like when we're in the smart factory, we're in driver assist mode at the moment. We've got a bit of adaptive cruise, we've got a bit of lane control, we've got something that is maybe telling us there's something in our blind spot and we need to keep an eye out for it. So I think we're doing okay with that, but AI is the only way to.
And Joe, I was just going to say that, but the difference is that in the analog to the EMS companies, that we're driving 10 different cars, and each car has a different level of autonomy, right?
Okay.
Yeah, different level of smart factory, right?
Yeah.
But that's a good analogy. I think the autonomous car and the deep learning that's being employed there, and just a massive amount of images that they're collecting to do this deep learning exercise is what's driving their success. We have the same ability in our world to collect those images, good and bad, and apply the same type of methodologies. So now we can start to really looking at a cross section of contributors, say, to a specific defect, and help that technician, engineer, operator understand where to prioritize and look first to get the most bang for the buck, right? Or in the case of the self-healing approach, apply that to that actionable item that's going to be made. I think the application of proprietary artificial intelligence engines that are designed around the data set that's being utilized is also really key here. And that's an area that we've really prided ourselves, is that we as have made a very large investment in the artificial intelligence game, and applying that in various different ways, starting with creating those proprietary AI engines to really be able to maximize our data set. So, and again, I think as measurement-based becomes the next level of currency, it's not just data, but it's measurement, very accurate measurement-based data, statistically relevant, et cetera, et cetera. There's going to be more application of that, and being able to use that same approach on a grander scale. So, and Bill's right. Again, we're going to get there. But we're taking steps, right? So we're along an evolutionary path here.
Yeah, it's a journey, isn't it? And there's a ways to go. I just want to wrap up the show with some of the key takeaways and just go round the table on that. It feels to me that we are in that very early kind of evolutionary steps. Bill talked about building the foundation blocks of a very tall building, and if you are doing that, you want those foundation blocks to be to be pretty solid. Zeev, I'll start with you. Do you feel like that to be a successful inspection company, you've not just got to be good at inspecting stuff, you've got to be great at dealing with the data and processing that data? Is it kind of a twofold approach?
More than yes, it is. But I would like to relate first of all today what you said about AI before. For one sentence is without AI, we will not be able to do what we're doing actually. So if we were trying to do a vision comparison of a picture to picture, we will never be able to do that because we have hundreds of millions of items, etc. So that's the whole patent is about how the AI is actually, proprietary AI is actually working. And this runs the business actually. So now taking that and asking, okay, where we're going to be, I think now we are focusing more and more on providing the information and the ability to use the information on the EMS side and the OEM side. But sooner or later, we will actually be a data provider to the manufacturers and manufacturers of items, of components, manufacturers of PCBs, every manufacturer that would like to use data for better design or for better decision making. So it goes together because we collect a lot of data and we make it available. So that's something that will grow in time. And let's say the challenge we are facing is how to make it something that everybody will be able to use on the right time for his purposes. And everybody here was right. I mean, the need on this long supply chain is different in every stage.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge, how to make it available with, I take the Bill's word, make with information on each of the steps. Yeah.
Yeah. So Bill, how do you keep everybody happy? How do you juggle all that and come up with a solution or an architecture or an ecosystem that people can safely operate in and, derive the value that they need to? Or is that a little bit utopian?
Well, you started by saying how to make everyone happy. So yeah, I'll let you know when I figure that out.
very, very utopian, right?
I'll let you know if you ever figure that out. I don't know, right? We need to, when we talk about building the foundation, we got to figure out if we're building a high rise or a gazebo, right? And I don't really know that yet. Different companies have different expectations and requirements, and this is going to be a tale of winners and losers, right? Going forward, the winners, the companies, the EMS companies that are able to adopt and adapt to the reality will in the future collect efficiencies and gains that will propel them forward ahead of everybody else, right? So what I see is this dichotomy, right? Is that separation of the winners and losers. And we're always going to have companies that are slow to adapt. And I think fewer of those are going to be surviving in the future.
Yeah.
How we get it all together? Do we need a UN or organizing body to keep us all honest and playing nice to each other, sharing good data and being all happy? I'll let you figure that out and let us know when you talk to enough people in the industry. Maybe we'll get somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. I think open dialogue is part of that, and actually understanding what everybody wants. But it's a complicated picture. Joel, I'll let you have the final word.
It feels like we're going about it the right way, right? We have to understand that this is not a flip of a switch. And overnight, we're going to have this again, utopian panacea. We really try to encourage our customers to take this in small pieces, take it in pieces that you can digest. We offer a suite of software, as many people out there do, but you really want to make sure that they're getting value out of individual pieces first, I think, before tying it all together, because now they can start to visualize what the end game can really be. But to not be in a position to have any level of success because they're trying to do too much at once, or maybe they just don't understand, as Bill said, what they're really looking at, because maybe they haven't sorted the noise from the real information. I think that's the worst thing that can happen, because that creates frustration and setbacks. So, aligning the implementation in digestible pieces, in chunks, is really the best approach in our opinion. And that's kind of what we've done, both with our own systems and how we're using data between those, and data sharing between the partners that we've partnered with from a screen printer pick and place perspective, and just it will evolve from there. It can't help but to evolve from there. And these commissions that Bill's referring to, and these larger governing bodies that will come into play as we more clearly identify the need and what the potential is, I think will help then kind of stretch things to the point where, again, we can't all jump into that sandbox and play nicely and make it work and deliver real results to our customers. That's the bottom line. A little less talk and a lot more action, right?
Yeah, a little less conversation. And I think the point you made about alignment is huge. I think aligning your data strategy, your inspection strategy with your business strategy and your business goals is important. As Bill said, there'll be winners and losers, data haves and data have-nots. I think that's going to be the key moving forward. But actually, I think the solution is holistic. It's not singular. There isn't one person that's got the ideal solution. And the more data we've got, providing we can utilize and verify that data, the more value we'll be able to drive the enterprise that has access to it. Guys, very valuable conversation today. Thank you so much for your time. I'm glad I managed to get three of my favorite inspection experts on the first episode of the show, and I look forward to talking to you again in the not too distant future. Thanks so much for your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.